paste the paper over me, but wounds heal when tears dry and cracks they don't show. So don't be so hard on yourself, no. Let's go back to simplicity. I feel like I've been missing me. Was not who I'm supposed to be. I felt this darkness hold me. We all get there eventually. I never knew where I belong, but I was right and you were wrong. Been telling myself all along. Don't be so hard on yourself, though. Learn to forgive, learn to let go. Everyone trips, everyone falls. So don't be so hard on yourself, though. 'Cause I'm just tired of marching on my own. Kind of afraid I'll feel it in my bones. Won't let my heart turn into stone. So don't be so hard on yourself, no. I'm standing on top of the world, right where I wanna be. So how can this dark cloud keep raining over me? But hearts break and hell's a place that everyone knows. So don't be so hard on yourself, no. Let's go back to simplicity. I feel like I've been missing me. Was not who I'm supposed to be. I felt this darkness hold me. We all get there.
Okay.
I never knew where I belong,
Emeliana, I think you may need to leave also. There she is. Okay. Okay. Welcome. All right, and I'd like to take a moment and welcome all of you who have joined us for this premier women's series. As you know, our special guest today is Emeliana Rice-Oxley. So I'd like to just take a moment and tell you what's going to happen. You know, for those of you who've been with us before, you know that our purpose in this series is really to, offer professional women the opportunity to be exposed to outstanding examples of women leaders. Now, if there are some objectives or intentions that we are striving for here, our intended outcomes are to share their experiences with other women leaders or aspiring women leaders. We offer this forum as a means of generating insights and learning, but it's also to powerfully demonstrate the value of senior leaders' willingness to develop others, and obviously to inspire women leaders to committed action. Now, for this afternoon, this is how it's going to unfold. After our welcome and introductions, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Emeliana. I want to give her a few moments to just welcome you also, and she'll probably want to put in some things that I left out of her bio. And we've got a number of topics that we'd love to get to, and ideally we'll get to all of them, but I think it's more important for you to get this upfront, close and personal experience of her. And so I'm not going to rush through topics just to get to all of them. I'm going to allow it to unfold naturally. Before we're done, some people have asked us about Christie Associates. I may take a minute or two and say something about that. And there's some questions and responses that have already come in. We'll do our best to offer those questions to her to respond to before we finish up the afternoon. Our intent here is to be with you for the next hour and a half. So without saying anything else, let me tell you about Emeliana. And by the way, she gave me permission to call her Emmy. So please don't think I'm being rude, okay? Okay. So let's start with some facts and some information. Some of you know her background, so please forgive any repetition. But there are those of you who are with us that may not know her as well. And so I'd like to let you know that she was appointed Vice President, Exploration and Upstream Business Petronas since 2014. Oftentimes we talk about credentials at the end, but I'd like to do that up front because her Bachelor's of Science in Geology from the U.S. University, South Carolina, was also matched with being a graduate of the Advanced Management Program from Harvard Business School. Now, as I said, you may know that she started her career in the Royal Dutch Shell Group in Malaysia. And after a number of years there, she joined Petronas, which is about 2012. And because she wanted to contribute to make a difference to the talents and the exploration business in Petronas. Now, Emeliana has led various transformation efforts to deliver Petronas's long-term strategic growth. And she's instrumental in placing Petronas on the global exploration stage. Now, because of the business transformation of Petronas exploration and her personal push for gender equality, she's earned recognition, obviously. I'll just name one or two. The list goes long, but in 2019, she's Female Executive of the Year. She made the 2020 Global Influencers 275 list. This is by the Asia Pacific Energy Assembly and the Women's Energy Council. Now, professionally today, she serves as director of Petronas Gasberhad, and she's a board member of the Petronas Management Training. She's advisory board member of the Women's Global Leadership Conference. And obviously, she's a frequent speaker at various international energy and leadership conferences. I think one of the emphasis for today, I'd like to tell you a little bit more that she values the diversity that women bring in leadership and business thinking. And I love the term bring in leadership and business thinking. She's a strong advocate of equal opportunities and creates awareness on unconscious gender bias at the workplace. So finally, her resilience has made her the champion of Petronas Leading Women Network and a council member of the Malaysian Women in Energy. She's passionate about developing people, as you can tell, and Petronas Future's leaders are high up on the list. She avidly supports their Leaders Develop Leaders program. So I'm sure I could go on, but let me pause here and ask you to join me in welcoming Emeliana Rice-Oxley. Welcome.
Thank you.
Now,
thank you, Mel.
I said I would pause so that you could fill in those areas that I may not have touched. And so the floor is yours. What else would you like them to know or say? What you want to say?
I think you've done more than enough, Mel. Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting such a long introduction. So thank you. Thank you for having me anyway.
Well, thank you. My team told me it was long. I said, but they got to know. They got to know. I want them to know. So thank you. Okay. So I want to dive right into some of our discussion topics, some of our conversation topics. And I'd like to start with the initiatives that you've championed and with a view on what makes you confident that they will advance the intent for more women leaders. So would you start there for us, please?
Right, thanks. Thanks for the question, Mel. And again, thank you for having me today. Now, to your question, at least to the first part of your question, what are things that I'm championing? Now, it has to be PLWN, Petronas Leading Women's Network. Just for your information, PLWN was established in 2015 and has evolved not just as a platform for women to connect, but as an advocate for gender diversity and inclusion to influence change in the organization and, like you said earlier, to create equal opportunities for women. And it's because, and why is it important? This is because whilst we take pride in being a merit-based organization, we also recognize that there are challenges that may hamper women from progressing in their career. and disadvantage them at the workplace. And we want to do something about it. And I'm pleased that through PLWN, we were able to raise awareness about gender bias, about the challenges and issues related to them, which prompted the commitment from our senior leaders to prioritize gender equality in their agenda. And I'm sure you will agree that commitment from senior leaders in any organization, and not just from us, is critical to create a gender inclusive organization. And maybe just to share with you, to date, women make up 30% of our workforce and 20% of our leadership position. So that's one of the things that I'm championing. And to the second part of your question, where you asked, why is it important? Can it make a difference? Well, in Petronas, we believe diverse views and backgrounds create a more, a more progressive and creative work environment that delivers better outcomes. And I think we've seen research and studies on this. And so diversity and inclusion, therefore, in Petronas is about all of us progressing together, regardless of gender or regardless of background for that matter. And it's critical to our sustainability agenda. And just to share with you, why is it important and can it make a difference? Our picture of success is to have an inspired women workforce with strong women leadership presence that will create diversity. And you mentioned this earlier, diversity in leadership and business thinking in Petronas. And of course, bottom line affects the business bottom line. That's what it's all about.
Yes. And so thank you. You said something in the middle there about leaders contributing to these initiatives. And would you elaborate a little bit more about that? And I'd like you to also include men in your comments. Okay.
Right. Yes. So leaders contribute to these initiatives, and you talk about men, obviously, definitely, because Mel, everyone can contribute to this effort, right? Regardless of position, regardless of gender. Because as I said earlier, equal opportunities for women is a business priority, and that's what we believe in Petronas. And we know that one of the biggest barriers that hamper women from progressing at the workplace is bias. Hence, it is not a women-only issue or a leadership issue, but an organizational issue. It affects how we attract, how we retain, how we promote talented women in the organization. Now, however, and this is where we can talk about how can we contribute, how can other leaders contribute, However, there is a lack of awareness about bias. And this applies to both men and women across all levels in the organization. And because of this lack of awareness, there is difficulty in accepting that bias exists at the workplace. And it's made more difficult by the fact that bias is not always easy to see or detect, but it happens. It happens daily and at every step that affect women in their career progression. So how do we solve a problem we don't fully see or understand? And how can leaders beyond people, for example, in PLWN, in Petronas, for example, how can they contribute? So based on my experience, there are many ways that we can contribute, especially men. So let's just talk about some of them. For example, I would say the first is don't dismiss bias, accept that gender equality or gender inequality exists, and be an ally. And this is important. If you don't know, then you organize something where you will learn about it. Organize unconscious bias training, because men and women are equally biased. It's not just men, it's not just women, but both men and women are equally biased, right? So leaders need to take time to engage openly with their teams, with their women talents, and understand the gender-related challenges that they face, because you cannot advocate for it unless you talk about it. That's one example. Another example is speak up. Speak up when you see bias, even if they are unintentional. Because we all need to pay attention, to the explicit and the implicit norms, the expectations, as well as incentives that shape our behavior. Now, always check, and I think this is important, this is where we all can contribute. Always check that women representation is not overlooked in any projects, in decision makings, in key activities. And I believe another thing leaders can do is create a safe space for open dialogue. Like this is one example, this conversation that you and I are having, so that people feel safe to intervene and have the courage to call out biases and not normalize them or trivialize them. And if you allow me, I'll share a very quick story.
Please do.
Trivializing, for example, you're probably aware of the Oilmen's Gala. Now, this is right. It's the annual event, right, for the oil and gas, for the local oil and gas industry. Gala. Just it is now called the Malaysian Petroleum Gala. After we highlighted the impact, the psychological impact of oil men to women in the industry. So just an example, don't trivialize those things. And maybe another way that men especially can contribute, or leaders can contribute, is get involved. Take deliberate action. And this is so important. We need more men like yourselves, more men more involved. Because if yours is an organization that is male dominated, then chances are most leadership positions are filled by men.
Okay.
And these men, as you know very well, are powerful allies, involved in decision making, including career progression and mobility. And we want them and we need them to be part of the efforts to advance gender equality. And maybe one last example I can offer is, if you have a women's network in your organization like PLWN, don't dismiss it as a club for women to solve women-only issues. It is a critical business priority. So, so we need to make sure that's the case. But if you don't have a women's network, now you may wish to start one now. And encourage others to take part in it and give them the recognition for doing so. So I think, Mel, in short, there's a lot of things that we can do to contribute as leaders. And as you very well know, leaders are role models. They set the tone for the organization. So
yes, exactly. So I want to make sure that we highlight at least those four. And just you said it so eloquently. I hate to summarize, but the key words that stayed with me or are staying with me is don't dismiss bias.
Right.
Speak up. Okay. And that includes a safe place to do so. There's take deliberate action. It's another one. And where there's a network, recognize that it's a business priority. And if there isn't a network, get one. Get one. So I want to make sure we, and I even wrote them down to make sure that I look at my own organization. Okay. Let me ask you this, just to further it. What would you say, in your own words, is most needed organizationally for women leaders to emerge? And I think right behind that, how does that make a difference? So you've touched upon this a little bit, but I'd like you to just hone in some, organizationally for women leaders to emerge.
Right. Yeah, sorry about that. I get too excited sometimes. Right. You talk about, what can organizations do, right? So this
Yes.
is from the
Yes.
perspective of the organization. Now,
Yeah.
I believe there are a number of things that organizations can do, but I also believe there are a few prerequisites,
Okay.
or what I would call, I guess, for lack of a better word, back to basics framework. You know, just like we have safety framework, we have integrity framework in all
Yeah.
organizations. So we need to have a few of those. And I think the first is to have policies and practices that do not tolerate bias.
Okay.
A policy where every employee is treated with respect and fairness, right? Because a policy we want that aims to create a positive work environment sets minimum standards of behaviors, including being respectful to women and their
Yes.
circumstances, and
Yeah.
one that does
Yeah.
not tolerate any form of discrimination. And this is not just
Yes.
for women, but diversity and inclusion in every aspect of it. So that's
Yes.
because you do need that framework. The
Yes.
second is, I would say, training, and this is really
Okay.
based on my experience, where we really need to create that awareness, right? So policy, training to mitigate bias, and I mentioned this earlier. The third, I would say, is to have a process or to remove bias from our evaluation and promotion decisions across the whole life cycle of the employee, how we hire, how we retain, how we promote, right? You want to remove them
Right.
because unconscious bias is one of the things that happen, despite the fact sometimes whether you have the best policies and whether you have the best intent, those biases creep in. So you want to have a process that can remove or minimize it. And maybe just
Yes.
share with you, in Petronas, we aim to remove bias or the invisible barriers that we talked about that prevent women from progressing. We want to create an even playing field for women because we believe it is not instead of meritocracy, but leveling the playing field for meritocracy. And
Yes. Yeah.
and I believe this is also where HR plays an important role to ensure the process is bias-free, to ensure there is clear criteria and hard
Yes.
metrics that can remove bias out of the
Yes.
decision-making process.
Yes.
There's so many ways that we can do that, right? To make sure
Yes.
that process is free of bias when it comes to
Yes.
employee evaluations and promotions. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of like the framework. Then
Right.
there's the I would say, in addition to that, because we all know sometimes the culture of the organization is important. It's the day-to-day experience that women or all of us go through. And so we
Yes.
need to also address that. And that's one of the focus areas also for PLW, to
Okay.
create a conducive work environment. So in addition to the framework, I would say is have a support system that calls out on bias or a culture to
Right.
speak up. And this is where a network like PLWN comes in, because
Yes.
we, at least in Petronas, we can highlight areas that we think needs change or we think are not fair. And we work with HR to ensure our practices. And it doesn't have to be policies, because policy can be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's our
Yeah.
practices and our processes are also bias-free. And we really push for creating awareness through training and conversation. So
Yes.
decision makers, everyone in the organization is aware. And lastly,
Right.
for PLWN, and that's also the supportive environment that I talk about, having a network like PLWN, because we feel that we can be the bigger and louder voice in speaking up against.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
These are just
So
examples.
that, go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off. Finish.
Finish.
Finish. Okay. Okay. One of the things that strikes me as I listen to framework, culture, and PLWN is how those get translated to behavior. You know, so we could have policies, we could have procedures in place, Emmy, But from your experience, are you seeing it show up in actual behavior in the organization?
Yes, I would say so.
Okay.
First things, of course, I believe, is awareness. You first need to acknowledge these biases. I mean, just one example, it's just bias. It can be other things. And by talking about it, by having conversations about it, by sharing stories, because when we advocate for gender diversity and inclusion in Petronas, we are not talking about numbers. We don't believe in faceless statistics. We want to
Yes.
make it real. We want to share stories that women have to tell. So
Yes.
it's about creating that awareness. When you create that awareness, and again, it's a journey. It's not going to happen overnight. People becoming more aware. So the next time the same people are in a conversation, they probably take a bit of a pause, like reflect on the conversation, because in the earlier conversation, they could have an aha moment that told them, okay, that's probably not the way to do it. That's probably not to say it, because you need to understand. Remember, it's one of the leadership skills, listening. So you need to understand and have empathy what's going on before you pass judgment. Bias is really nothing more than our brain taking shortcuts, right? Passing judgments before we hear the full story and before we understand. So it does. And we've got real examples where leaders who attended this unconscious bias training that we actually carry out in Petronas together with our leadership center and HR, and they came back and said, this has been so useful. We have a different conversation when we now talk about our talents, because now we can pause. And not only do we pause, we give others the chance to speak. We create space.
Right.
So it's not just about gender, but about a lot of things, about creativity, about ideas, right? So it does show up. And we also get feedback from women. So we kind of, it's a journey, but it is getting traction.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. I'd like to invite your thoughts and feelings about a number of different things. And so I'd like to, just toss some subjects at you and just get your feelings, your thoughts about them. And the first one that comes to mind is the importance of authenticity as a leader. So what's important about authenticity? You're smiling. It's one of your...
Authenticity, to me, it's important, and not just as a leader, really, but as a person. It's interesting because I was just remembering, I recently listened to, I don't know if you know, Julian Treasure on TED Talk. He gave tips on how to speak so that people listen. How to speak so people listen. And there's a few things, but one of them, he said, was authenticity. So you need to speak with authenticity. And he said, authenticity is simply being yourself and not imitating a non-genuine persona. Standing in your own truth, he said. It's and how I take it is, it's who we are, our genuine self, through our thoughts, our words, and our actions. So that's what authenticity means. Now the question is, what's so important about it, right? So for me, it's about, as a leader, it's about doing your job without compromising your values. It's about knowing who you are and not letting anyone keep you from doing things or making decisions that you know is right. And why is it important again? It's because people trust us when we are true to ourselves. And as a leader, I believe that trust is important, because trust makes it possible to get things done. It can inspire people to do great things, right? Because people want to be led by someone real. So that's why authenticity is important. But of course, having said that, and that's the reason perhaps why I smiled, because it's easier said than done, because we cannot simply declare, I'm an authentic leader. We can't. It's a quality that others attribute to you. So, but anyway, bottom line is, I believe authenticity in a leader is important because it brings the best in people.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly. And you know, some of the work that we do, Emmy, and one of the things that we emphasize is cultivating authenticity as a leader. And you know, the proof is in the pudding, my grandmother used to say.
Right.
And so it's one thing for me to feel like I'm being authentic.
Correct.
And it's a total other thing for you and my world and people around me to have that experience. And so that's why in the work that we do, we call it a journey also. Okay, so here's another thought. It's great. I say a thought. I'm thinking about self-reflection. And wondering, you know, what does self-reflection actually mean to you? And obviously, why is that important?
Right. Self-reflection to me is taking time, that time to think about or give serious thoughts to my thoughts, my emotions, yes, my feelings and actions. It's like looking at myself in the mirror and asking for feedback from myself, like an inner witness, so to speak, right? And yes, so well, that's what self-reflection means to me. And you know, Mel, I'm sure we all had the experience when we had an emotional response to something, or we said something that we later regretted. I'm sure you've had that, right? I mean,
I know what you mean. You know? I know what you mean.
And this, for me, moments like this call for self-reflection.
Okay.
And just to share with you what it means for me or how I do it. Self-reflection, I do it as often as I can because it, like I said, it helps me pause, to think, to analyze, to if you wish, dive deep into my thoughts and determine the why behind them. For self-improvement, for example, at the end of a long day, and I bet you I'll do that at the end of today's conversation. You know, I at the end of a long day, I sometimes take a moment to reflect how it went. Either talk to myself or write my thoughts down. Reflect on my action, the words that I used, how I behaved in a meeting or discussion, you know, whether I gave people the chance to speak, or if I listened well, or if I did something that I shouldn't have or not proud of. It's about questioning what I do. In a positive way, of course, and then deciding whether there is a better way of doing it in the future, rather than just carry on doing the same thing that isn't working well for me. So that's what self-reflection. And you know, I think you know, if we without self-reflection, I'm afraid we probably walk around unconscious and unreacted. And a friend of mine said it's like sleepwalking. You know, going through life, you know, without thinking, moving from one thing to the next, without making time to evaluate. So, and by the way, it's not just for work. I believe you can also do self-reflection. You know, you can ponder about your personal life.
Sure. Thank you. And you know, as you speak, I'm reminded that it actually informs us of our behavior going forward. You know, we thought to correct, we can self-correct, I call it, but you know, it's meaningful in that.
You actually do that a lot in your program, right?
Yes, exactly, and in life, you know, and in some of the executive coaching we do, we encourage people to reflect also. Okay, so now along these lines, then we have statements, phrases that people use a lot. Make a difference is one of those.
Right.
Okay. And, people talk about it. And I personally, I've heard some, really good examples of how people do that. You've mentioned a dozen, just in the last hour. The question I have is translating that desire into behavior.
Right.
So we have aspiring leaders, whether they be men or women. They want to make a difference. And how do they translate that desire into actual behavior that produces some positive outcomes? So what are your thoughts about that?
Right. Thanks for that question. I remember I've given talks in the past, and I talk about making a difference. Kind of sounds cliche, but really, for me, I really believe in that, and making a difference, to me at least, making a difference to the lives of the people around me is something I value. And the reason is because it is my purpose. Right. So I think maybe it's worthwhile talking a little bit about purpose, because I think purpose is really important. It's not just I woke up one day and decide, oh, I'll make a difference, or I like to try and make a difference. So it's because it's my purpose. So purpose is a wonderful thing, because it's the reason why we do something, why we do the things that we do, and it's usually something that is larger than our own existence. I believe it guides our life decisions, it shapes our goals, it offers a sense of direction and creates meaning in what we do. And I'm sure you've got that in your program as well, talking about the importance of purpose, right? And I believe it's something that really motivates us, that drives us, and makes us happy. So for me, purpose is connected to my work, which is to make a difference to the lives of the people I work with. Make a difference to, let's say I mentioned that earlier, or you read that in my bio, making a difference to exploration. And in the case of people, it's really to make them successful and extraordinary. For example, providing them the support that they need to grow, and speaking up for them when I can, kind of like what I'm doing for PLWN, no matter how small my contribution. Because purpose gives me a voice, I believe does, in the shape of making a difference. It gives me not only the voice, but also something bigger that I can do, the courage, the resilience. And I can tell you, sometimes the good intention, it's not always easy, right? And so when things are tough, that's when purpose comes in and actually helps you. For example, making unconscious bias training a priority. I mentioned this earlier. That's what we needed to do, but making it a priority when there was very little awareness about the existence was not easy. And we know the importance of it, right? So the question is how do we convince people to fix a problem that they cannot see? So of course, when I say this, it's not that I'm pushing for it on my own. I had great support from many people to make a difference in that area. But still, regardless, it wasn't easy. And I had to personally persevere because I really want to make a difference. So in this case, how does it translate into behavior? It is really driving it. It's something that you believe in. And my purpose, making a difference, is the reason why I take time, and this is true, why I take time to teach and not tell people what to do as part of their capability development, right? Even though I can assure you, telling is so much easier, and it takes so much more time, right? So that's an example. It's also the reason why I take time to how should I say, correct misperceptions or speak up about capability or about D&I. And it's also the reason why I take time to mentor many of our talents, and why, Mel, I take time to speak to you today.
Yes, exactly,
So
exactly.
comes out in
Wonderful.
those behaviors.
Yes, wonderful. Thank you. I love how you connected purpose, your own, to about people being successful and extraordinary with courage and bias. You used a phrase about awareness that rings very true for me personally. I've often said to people, it's really challenging to fix something that you can't see. And so that whole awareness, bringing awareness forward, has always been a critical step. So thank you for that. There are people in our audience and people who will see this that are still facing challenges as a woman leader, and so let me ask you some things in that arena. If you could point to a couple, 2, 3, maybe, the greatest challenges for women leaders from your perspective, what would they be?
Right. Mel, until 2015, I cannot say that I truly appreciate or understand the challenges that women face at the workplace.
Okay.
So
Okay.
to the question, as a woman leader, what were the challenges? It's kind of hard for me to share, because in fact, I have to say that I was rather oblivious about it and even indifferent. And it was only in 2015, when I was made the champion of Petronas Leading Women's Network, that I finally woke up to the reality on the ground. So I do not have firsthand experience of, say, being overlooked because of my gender. And I bet you, even if I was, I wouldn't know. And my experience, so this is where this comes in then, what has my experience been, has always been one based on competency, capability, and proven track record or performance. I relied on the strong foundation in my core skills, know my stuff. And I had great sponsors. So this is important. I have great sponsors who gave me wonderful opportunities to grow, and of course a supportive work environment. And equally, from my experience, equally important, I have a strong support at home, and where parenting and family responsibilities are equally enjoyed and shared with my husband and I, right? So that's my experience. But maybe what I can share based on what I learned over the past few years, I think the challenges for women leaders are many, but you said pick a few. So based on, I would say, based on what we've heard and the information that we have at hand, and also based on many studies and research, we can actually put the challenges, I would say, into 2 buckets or 2 factors. That I believe the combination of these 2 buckets or 2 factors, they combine in subtle ways to create roadblocks for women. And studies call them the push and pull factors. I'm sure you're very much aware of this. The push is, these are the external factors, the limitations placed on women, right, by others, for example, their organization, their society or culture. We can talk a little bit about that. Then there's the pull factors. These are internally driven factors, I would say, or limitations that women put on themselves. So if we talk about the push factors first, the external, I think to some extent I mentioned that earlier, right? We talked about biases, we talk about access to equal opportunities, even access to mentors, for example. So these are some of the challenges, and the way that we can help women in that case is, again, I mentioned about the framework and the support system, right? So what companies can do or are doing, like Petronas, to address those, like tackling bias, policy, training, process, and network. So I think
Yes.
to some extent we've kind of covered that bit.
Okay. Okay.
But on the other side, the pull factors, these can be behaviors and traits that are unique to women because of the way we were brought up or our culture. And I believe it is important and very useful for women to be aware of what they are. And just so you know, I only learned about them myself a few years ago. And
Okay.
maybe I can share with you because these are just some examples, challenges
Please
that
do. Please do. Yeah.
Right. So we invited Sally Helgeson to Petronas to give a talk on women leadership. Some of you may know that she's a leadership expert and author of How Women Rise. And the title of her book is How Women Rise, Break the 12 Habits That Are Holding You Back. So remember that, 12 habits that are holding you back. And we call them bad habits, right? So I don't know, maybe there are many women like me because I initially thought, I don't really need this book. I don't really need to read it because I don't have any of these bad habits.
Yeah.
That's what I thought, right? Yeah. I thought I was unique. I don't have any of this until I read her book. And interestingly, I recognized half of the 12 habits she wrote about. And even more interesting is not only do I recognize them, but I actually realized that I may have suffered from these bad habits in the past. And to some extent, maybe I'm still suffering from them today. And so, I thought if I knew about these habits, and hence why I'm bringing this up, if women leaders know about these so-called habits that women tend to have unconsciously, we're not aware of them. I might have done something different about my career. I might have taken a different trajectory, but who knows, right? And just to give an example, what I'm talking about is one of the bad habits she talked about is reluctance to claim your achievements. So I recognize that, and we can talk about that as well, how I recognize it. But this is the point that I'm saying. There's always the push and the pull factor, and hopefully women have an organization that addresses the push factor, but they need to rise and address the pull factor themselves. Yes.
It's excellent. Would you be willing to give a couple more of those 12?
I think there's a few like minimizing. There's about the perfectionist trap. All those kind of things. You kind of hear about them, but if you read about it, you kind of understand it a little bit and what you can do about them, right?
Yes.
I mean, just to share, reluctance to claim your achievement. You talk about the award just now that I got for the female executive. I was nominated for the award, but it took me a while, and only after checking the website and the criteria numerous times, I have to say, before I finally accepted the nomination and the award, because I wasn't sure I deserved the award. I wasn't sure that my achievements were something that is worthwhile to be.
Right. Okay. Emmy, thank you for being so honest with us. I just want to tell you I really appreciate it. Okay. So you kind of bundled together a number of things that I was thinking about in our conversation. Challenges, but you've also mentioned how someone can move beyond those. You talked about sponsor, you talked about support system, and you used two keywords, at least in my world, two keywords about competency and capability. The world of work that I've been invited into, and people in my organization have been invited into, emphasizes, skill, emphasizes capability, emphasizes competence. We've even added another one called capacity. And you know, I know you read my book, 6 C's of Leadership. So I'm just pointing to one of those things that, you know, if we attend to a number of things, they kind of come together and, you know, really propel us forward. So, you know, those who are looking for the push and the pull, you know, men or women leaders, you know, can find these ideas to apply universally, to apply personally also. So I appreciate you mentioning these. Let's get to tips, okay? Because I know when people come to this, they often, myself included, want to go away with 2 or 3 tips that I can go and apply right away, right? So you've had these kinds of conversations before, so I'm sure you've kind of honed down 2 or 3 that that you feel might be most useful. Would you share those with us, please?
Right. 3 tips. Right. You know, I believe to some extent I've said a little bit about that already, Mel, when we talk about, you know, how I managed to get to where I am. Now,
Yeah.
some of the things, okay, maybe I'll repeat the first one, let's say, know your stuff. And I mentioned that, right? It's every time when I give this leadership talks, a lot of people will remember this is one of my key messages. Know your stuff. This simply, you know, build your core competencies, and you talk about that earlier as well. And because knowing your stuff, together with, of course, delivering great performance, will earn you the respect of your peers and your superiors, I believe, who will then be more than willing to assign new opportunities to you, because you need to have a track record, right? And it will also help build your own confidence and courage to take on new and bigger roles, because you always need something to stand on to be able to contribute. So know your stuff is important. Although I would like to add, however, you also need to have the courage to take on new roles, even if you may not have all the required competencies. Remember, this is one of the 12 habits that, you know, Sally also talked about. You know, we want to be perfect before we are willing to do something. So I believe, because it's always, you can always build as you go. So that would be one, you know your stuff. The second I would say is have a clear sense of purpose, as well as clear career goals. Because like I said, it's the one thing that drives you when things are tough. It's clarity of purpose is a powerful source of energy that helps you accomplish your goals, drives you, and also get things done and help you overcome, and this is important, help you overcome negative experiences or difficult challenges that I am sure will definitely come our way. Right? So purpose helps to center us, to help us focus. And this is especially true if family support is not readily available to you. Right? Because you know, sometimes it's the daily hassles at work, and it's not that blatant discrimination that, you know, just threw women off the career track. It's those daily hassles, and you combine that with daily hassles at home. It's difficult, which indirectly means family support is critical to your success.
Right.
So yeah, purpose helps you, family support, of course. And I also believe having a sponsor helps. Someone who will give you the opportunities to do new things, help you be successful, and talk about your success.
Yes.
But of course, to get a sponsor who will advocate for you, you will first have to demonstrate that you can perform and deliver. So those would be my tips. But Mel, if you allow me, in addition to just those few tips, I actually would like women leaders to also consider a few other things.
Please do. Yes.
So it's
Yeah.
not tips, but well, maybe something to think about. I would say, empower yourself.
Mm,
Don't wait for permission to manifest your drive, your creativity, your achievement, or to take charge of your career. Because sometimes
yeah.
we feel that we need to be told before we can do these things, right?
Yes.
Then
Yes.
if you haven't done so already, I would say have a conversation and make clear to your spouse or to your future spouse
Hmm.
that parenting is the responsibility of both parents and not a privilege reserved for the wife only. I believe it's, share the love and share the workload because,
Okay.
because equality starts at home.
Okay.
And
Okay.
lastly, if I just can add, lift other women.
Uh,
You don't have to be in a leadership position or a senior leadership position to lift other women, to provide support.
yeah.
But of
Yes.
course, if
Yes.
you are already in a leadership position, it's all the more reason that you should, because
Yes.
because we need as many advocate to create equal opportunities for women. So
Great. Great. Thank you for adding those. And so I'm walking away with instead of one or two tips, I've got more than a half a dozen. And know your stuff. Um, Clear sense of purpose, clear sense of career goals. There's family support in there and sponsor. Um, but also the last three that you mentioned, really strikes a chord. Empower yourself, and I always add others, but I think it has to start someplace. Empower yourself, and allow me a moment to smile when you say conversation with spouse about parenting. Um, and I think of all of the times I've worked with execs and um, who haven't had that conversation, and they wonder why they're feeling a certain way. And if I could quote you, I would love to use this phrase, quality starts at home.
yes.
I love that phrase. Okay. And lastly, one of the areas that especially the women that we work with have talked about, you said in 3 words, how to lift other women. And I say we've talked about it before because the kinds of things that we've heard, Emmy, are some of the biases that they encounter don't always come from men.
Mhm.
There's a lot of conversation about community. There's a lot of conversation about women's networks. But those 3 words, lift other women, I think is critical and key. So thank you for those. Really appreciate those. Okay. We're in a good place now to let me give you a pause. You've been talking and really brilliantly. Let you have a sip of water. Um, I'd like to just tell our viewers that one of the intentions in inviting Emmy to be with us today is that her views and her thoughts and her feelings mirror a lot of the work that we at Christie Associates do. So I just wanted to take a moment and mention that. Mention it because we have an ongoing opportunity for people to find out about what it is we do in our Women Leaders program. We call it a discovery session. And really the intent there is to, engage people into what it's about. We offer insights into the themes and the content of it, and, exploring what makes it unique. But I think what I like most about the discovery session is that you actually, it's exclusive, it's exciting, yes, but it's valuable in and of itself. And so people come away with tools that they could actually use in their developmental journey. And so that's what makes it exciting for me. And so I think someone from our team will put the link in the chat if you want to explore that with us. We've got 2 coming up in August, so it's something that you could consider being a part of with us. So I feel like, Emmy, that was a little commercial, you know. So, but I couldn't resist letting folks know that we support you and the work that you do 100%. And this is our own little way of doing it, on our side of the world here. Okay, let me go back to you who have graciously joined us on our YouTube channel, and give you an opportunity to ask our distinguished guest any questions that you may have. As I mentioned before, we may or may not get to all the questions, but certainly we'll do our best to offer her an opportunity to respond. I imagine that since the names are here, it's okay to mention the name of the person. So we have a question from a different industry, Emmy. I know her. She's a CEO in the finance industry. And she's asking, how do you defend a view of choosing the right person for promotion or job versus decisions that are driven by gender? So how do you defend a view of choosing the right person for promotion versus decisions that are driven by gender?
Right. Interesting question, right? And I was thinking, if I'm confronted with that decision, how would what would guide me in that decision? And I like to revert back to purpose. Why are you making those decisions? And remember, when we talked about earlier on, I talked about, gender diversity and inclusion is never about statistics. Statistics, great, but it's never about statistics. And I also said earlier that we are for meritocracy. We stand for meritocracy. And we want to create, what we're doing is trying to create a level playing field where women have the opportunity to be given equal opportunities. So if I'm guided by those decisions, it's not about statistics, it's about why. And we want the best people, and we believe the best people, diverse set of people, diverse groups of people will bring value to the business. Then I'm guided by that. It's the best candidate for the job. I wouldn't do it just because I'm trying to fulfill some kind of a quota or a feel-good feeling. Now, the more important question for me then is to say, in order for me to have a good enough number of both male and female candidates that I can really choose from, this pool of candidates, I need to make sure that I work in the background to make sure that women have the right capability development program. They have the right sponsors, the right mentors to actually remove some of those invisible barriers so that they can stand on equal footing in terms of their possibility for or their opportunities for promotion and mobility. I'm not sure that's a straightforward answer, but for me, it's always guided by the purpose. Why are you doing it?
Yes. Well, you mentioned clarity of purpose before, and so, and you also mentioned values, and so those are 2 good standards or criteria to guide a decision. Okay, thank you for that, and I'm sure Jacqueline thanks you also. Here's another question. She's saying that I was intrigued by the call by Emmy that we should call out biases, remarks as it happens. I often find myself in that position, she says, but do not know how. Hope to learn more effective ways to do this. Would you care to comment about this?
Right, right. And you know what? It's a very important question, because I think all of us struggle with that, including myself. You know, when do you stand up and speak up? When do you kind of like just smile and say, okay, it's not worth the effort there, you know, let it slide. And I don't think, at least I haven't found a clear how to yet.
Okay.
I guess it depends on the situation. I'll share this with you. I mean, real experience. And sometimes it is not easy, but what would be helpful, first of all, is if you have an environment where people are aware of it, so that when you do speak up, you don't stick out like a sore thumb, because everyone has the same understanding that this is something we believe in as an organization. Diversity and inclusion is important, and what are the kind of like the normal behaviors that we should accept as an organization. Now, if you have that foundation, it makes speaking up a little bit easier. Right? Because everyone speaks the same language, they understand it, and you speaking up is just trying to remind them on the rare occasions that they forgot, or they, you know, slip off, you know, black out, or, you know, got a blank in the mind. You know, sometimes these things happen, right? You forgot about that, because remember what I said, biases is, you know, your brain taking shortcuts. So I think, first of all, having that would be really important. So creating awareness would be very helpful. It makes intervention easier. So that's one. But at the end of the day, it is also, you have to make that judgment. You have to make that call. There are times when I thought, okay, I'll just smile and kind of let it slide, because it has no direct impact on a decision that we have to make, or direct impact on something of a more significance. But there are cases, and I did step up. You know, for example, we were talking, this is, you know, one of the top leaders discussion within Petronas, and for some reason we had a discussion, and there was a point raised by one of the leaders that gave the wrong impression about women, what they do, which kind of like connecting what they do to their commitment to value, to their commitment to delivering their job. And so, you know, I stood up, and it was, you know, in the presence of all the top leaders in Petronas, and say, sorry, I would like to correct that statement, because it gives the wrong impression about women's commitment to work. And you know what? It was the right thing to do, because the leader was saying, oh my God, you're absolutely right. It was not my intention. And you know, thank you for correcting me. So again, you kind of need to see the situation, I would say. Again, like I said, I don't have a checklist or tips on yes, no. It really in put into context.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. I was also thinking about our work again, and one of the keys that we encourage people to pay attention to is, are you reacting versus responding? And you know, yours was a response. It came from a place of not only authenticity, but it came from a place of genuine contribution. And so it makes a big difference. You know,
you put it nicely, Mel. I couldn't put it any nicer than what you've done. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see if we can get another comment or question here. So there, Fern was talking about, actually she was thanking you, the practical tips on self-reflection, and talking to self and reflecting on your words, reflecting on your actions in meetings, she's talking. So this really what you described, deciding whether there is a better way, simple but powerful. So she's just wanting to thank you for that, okay? And Ali was also saying the same thing, a reminder on self-reflection. I feel like I've been on autopilot, she says, and everything that I do every day. So you really struck a chord there. And so these are comments and some takeaways from our audience. Thank you, very courageous sharing indeed. With purpose comes clarity and grounding, especially when we start to hit bumps in the road or brick walls. And someone else also mentioned, I love what you said about the privilege of equal parenting.
Yes.
The privilege of equal parenting. Okay, hold on. Let's see if I can get some more here.
Now, maybe just to share with you, you know, when my husband and I, we were married for 3 years before we decided to have a child. And when we did, you know, and we both know what we wanted out of our career. We really wanted to, we were still young at that time, and we really wanted to build our career. And when we had the first child, and when it comes to, you know, after my maternity leave, it was a decision. It was not a decision of who's going to stay home and take care of the kid. That was never the decision. And that was never the conversation. It was, right, what are we going to do? So it was a shared conversation and shared responsibility. How are we going to manage this going forward? How are we going to, whilst we manage our family commitment and our work commitment. So I just thought I would share that because.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And someone commented right behind that to say that equal parenting is so important for the children and in the long run. You know, so they're really emphasizing that.
And maybe if I can say this, because I also believe, now not a lot of people believe this, but I believe the way you do anything is the way you do everything. Right? So if you believe in gender equality at work, then you should also believe in gender equality at home.
Yes, yes, exactly. That's perfect. Perfect. There's someone, Karen, is saying that, you know, thank you for your insights on the topic close to her heart and most women. And she's asking, how much do you attribute your growth as a leader to your mentors? You know, and what follow-up question, what percentage of these mentors were or are women?
You know, in my career to date, I've never reported to a female boss. And none of my sponsors are female, but that's because I am in a male-dominated industry. I am in a particular part of the industry that is really male-dominated. It's exploration. So it's and most of my career has been either up until I joined Petronas was either I was the only female in the meeting room or I was the only Malaysian in the meeting room. So it's very different. And the mentors that I had were a few and limited because at some point they kind of gave up on me. Well, it's that, you know, it's like, okay, what else can we do? What else can we talk about? Because the interesting thing, though, although I believe in mentoring, and I do that now because, you know, maybe I would say, again, like I said, if I had the benefit of that, maybe I would have taken a different trajectory. Who knows? But my mentor has been mostly related to more the technical line. And also, I believe if you are in a I would call it a technocrat organization, it's always assumed that if you're good technically and they move you into a leadership position, you're also all of a sudden good in terms of your leadership, right? It's an assumption, which is not always the case. So my mentorship was very different in that sense. It was more about the technicalities, the commerciality of things, rather than what are you going to do, so on and so forth, because I was really clear on what I wanted to do. So they kind of, fine, let her carry on,
the issue.
Lost cause, I don't know. But I think now having the knowledge, having the awareness about the challenges that women face, I believe mentoring is important because, like I said, you know, mentoring is not just to provide support, to inspire, but to be role models because there's very few of us women especially, and also now having a better understanding, there are challenges that women feel that they would like to talk to maybe another female role model or another female,
Mhm.
because they may have something in common. But more
Yeah.
important, I believe, is one of the reasons I do mentoring is really maybe just to lend, you know, an ear,
Hmm.
so
Yes.
people can just share. I may not be in a position to, provide a lot of advice on career and everything, but it's just
Mhm.
having that someone to listen to,
Yes.
one who
Yes.
empathizes
Exactly.
and
Yes.
gives confidence and provide maybe a third eye view, so to speak.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
unfortunately, I can't share about my mentoring experience, but it
Yes.
doesn't mean that it cannot work. But it
Yes.
has to be
Exactly.
based on genuine trust and relationship. You cannot
Hmm.
engineer the chemistry between you and your mentor.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. It reminds me of something someone said to me about being seen, and just to be with somebody who you actually have that experience of being seen is just very powerful.
Mhm.
Yeah. We have a question about metrics, and uh, Shah is asking if you could only have one metric to measure the success of the gender agenda, what would you choose and why?
Ultimately, in a business world, whatever we do, whether it's a project, whatever, whether it's an initiative, it all needs to translate into bottom line,
Okay.
right? And whether it's dollars, whether it's profit after tax, whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
Um, that's the nature of the business. And so when
Hmm.
it comes to gender, gender diversity and inclusion, there is one metric, and that would be if you can see the percentage of women in the workforce.
Hmm. Hmm.
Percentage of women again depends. What is your aim, right?
Yes.
The percentage of women in leadership position. For
Yes.
us now, for example, like I said, in Petronas, we are on a journey. We have a long-term aspiration, but for PLWN, what I want to do is to create the day-to-day experience, change the day-to-day experience where
Yeah.
women feel that equal opportunities are there, women feel that they are included, women feel that they have a voice, and that you can't measure in numbers, but you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
measure in the how women feel about themselves, how committed they
Hmm.
are, how invested they are in themselves and the company, right?
Yes.
And
Yes. Yes.
kind of conversation you have where ideas flow, there's no restriction because you feel that you are welcome, you are part of the organization.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
You will
Yes.
have those hard metrics, but like I said, they are important. But for me, it's not about faceless statistics. It's about the day-to-day experience.
Right.
For
Right.
example, in your organization, if you are a technical organization and if you have to wear personal protective equipment, for example, your PPEs, whether you have PPEs for women.
Yes. 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 We both are familiar with the stories, the early stories about women going off in your industry, going off to platforms,
Right.
and the environment was not, I'll just mildly say, very welcoming.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, so I'm checking the time here with us just to make sure that we've included. Um, there's a comment, and this looks like it's someone who knows you.
Right.
And she says that 100% mentoring is great, and Juan Emmy does spare her very limited time with many. She walks her talk. So this is a one of our participants. You know Siti Aziz, so
Yes, I do. Yes.
yeah. So
And it's
she's
true.
letting people know.
And just to share, I not only do one-to-one, one-on-one mentoring. What I'm trying to do now, because I want to try and reach out to as many women leaders as I can, I do what I
Yeah.
call pod mentoring. So in groups of
Ah,
four or five, and we meet
yes.
regularly. So they would. So the idea, I don't know if this is going to work. We just started it a few months ago. They would kind of like they would have a pod or a group, and they would
Yeah.
choose amongst themselves who they want to be in that group. Only maybe four or five, no more than that. Something that they have
Okay.
in common, so that when
Hmm.
we have this conversation, then they all gain the benefit of that.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Together.
right. So that's what I try to do. And we talk about self-reflection, we talk about communication, we talk about critical thinking, things that
Yes.
help them progress as well. So
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. Um, we have another question. Um, and the question is, what's your view on gender equality versus gender diversity? You know, which one would help women to rise? So they're making a distinction between equality and diversity.
right. Well, for me, diversity is simple. It's the numbers. It's the
Hmm.
mix.
Yeah.
And you can buy diversity. You can hire people, but
Yeah. Yeah.
that's all you have. You have numbers. Uh,
Numbers.
so it's the mix, like I said, right? Because it could be diversity in all in many areas, not just gender.
Mhm.
So that's just the mix. Equality to me refers to the ability to give equal opportunity. So equality, so opportunities that you give both to men and women, regardless of their gender. That's what equality means. Giving opportunities um, regardless of the gender in this particular case.
Right.
Really, I think more important is inclusion, because inclusion is where you can really make a difference. You make people feel that they are welcome, that they are part of the organization, that you're
Yeah.
not some outcast, that you're because you're different,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And when you feel welcome, that you are part of the organization, you have a voice, that your contribution matters, you see the difference. You can it
Yes.
impact performance, it impacts
Yes.
self-esteem, it impacts confidence. At the end of the day, it
Hmm.
impacts results for the company. So
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
the inclusion bit. And if you believe in
Yes.
that, then you want equality. And what it
Yes.
means is you give people the opportunities regardless of their gender,
Yes.
and
Yes.
you provide the support to make sure that they can play at the same level playing field, right?
Correct. Right. Correct. Right. Great distinction, Emmy. Thank you for that. And you know, I think the answer to the follow-up question is obvious, at least to me, that the one that helps women rise is really we're talking about equality, you know, and inclusion. You know, so thank you for that. I'm just taking a glance if there are any last questions. I saw a group of questions one time. Um, let's see if I can find them. We had some come before we started, and like to see if are they available also? The 4 or 5 questions we had before we started. I'm talking to my team in the background, Emmy.
I understand.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So one that caught my attention from before, Emmy, has to do with working from home. And the the question had to do with organization, but I think you've actually answered that. Let me just open up the subject working from home for you and ask you, what, personally, your own experience and anything you would, bring our attention to, for, being effective and working at home. Anything like that?
Sure, sure. I
Okay.
can share my experience as well as what we're doing in Petronas, maybe just from the perspective of the organization.
Mhm.
Since, the start of this, I call it the global experiment, right? Because we're forced to
Mhm.
work from home. There
Yeah.
are a few things that we put in place to allow ourselves to be more efficient, but at the same time also
Yeah.
take into consideration the impact on a personal basis on individuals. Because it's not a choice. I mean, back in 2000, I can't remember now, 2004 or so, five, I work from home, but it was a choice, and it's a completely different experience compared to what we're going
Yes.
through right now. And one of
Yes.
them is the fact that with the lockdown, a lot of us, a lot of women, especially we're talking now in the context of women, have the added responsibility of, because of school and things like that, they ended up having more accountability in doing housework or a
Mm.
responsibility as opposed to probably before when they had support, whether it's
Okay.
nursery or play school
Mhm.
and things like that. So one of
Yeah.
the things we do in Petronas is to make sure that our leaders and our staff have the opportunity to speak up and share those limitations or those requirements that would maybe put a little bit of flexibility in,
Yeah.
working hours and so on and so forth, to be
Yes.
more mindful of those limitations. And of course, this
Yes.
applies not just to women, but also to men. So that's
Yes.
kind of things that organization can do, kind of like say, when do you start, when do you stop, and things like that, right? And making
Yes.
sure you have all the tools and the equipment for you to be as efficient as you need to.
Yes.
On the
Exactly.
personal side, I would say, I heard this a lot. Initially there's this whole excitement of, first of all, there's this view, no, we can't work from home. It's all kinds of excuses. And then,
Yeah.
global experiment, no choice, you have to do it. And then you go through the initial stage where people are saying, hey, actually, this is working. This is
Uh-huh.
be working, and I feel that I'm more productive than I was, and so on and so forth. And you
Yes.
see this curve, if you were to plot it, this
Yeah.
enthusiasm and all that thing. But you're also now, because of this prolonged situation, I think it's kind of getting down. It's
On
like a
the
dip.
other side.
Yeah, on the
Yeah.
other side, it's dipping, and I think that has to do with the fact that we're now getting to the stage where we don't know when work starts and when our personal life starts, or when work ends and where one begins. So,
Okay.
um, and I think that's most of the time that I hear. So
Yeah.
again, discipline, um, focus, purpose comes in to say, okay, how do I manage
Yeah.
that? And I
Exactly.
also believe sometimes it's because it's something we impose on ourselves.
Yes.
We can decide when
Yes.
to stop and when to start work, unless
Yes.
there's an emergency, and depending on your
Emergency.
business, you
Mhm.
might have to attend to those. But otherwise,
Yeah.
following some kind of a strict schedule might help. And the
Mhm.
other bit that I often hear as well is to do with, we said, even at the workplace, when we have in a physical location, we always say
Mhm.
women are always in the background. Remember that 12 habits, minimizing, read about it, talk about it. So we're not as visible sometimes. So that is becoming exaggerated in a virtual world,
Exactly.
maybe.
Mhm.
And I think those are the kind
Mhm.
of things that we can take specific action to make sure
Exactly.
that we are
Yes.
not invisible. So,
Yes.
there are
Yes.
some practical tips that you can read about. And I think those are the things that we can
Yeah.
actually do something about.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I appreciate you taking the organizational viewpoint there, because there are things that the organization has actually stepped up and assisted and supported, you know. So, Emmy, I would love for us to talk for another hour, but I think I promised our viewing audience that we would close at 4. So let me just say to those who've tuned in, we're going to put our contact and connection information in the chat. So if you'd like to reach out to us or have any further questions, please feel free to do so. And we'll do our best to not do our best, we will respond. Okay, so let me just take this last minute and just really express our sincere appreciation to you, Emmy, for not only taking the time, but to share who you are, share your heart, share your experience. And, from what I read from the comments, it's made a difference already to a lot of people before this call, and to those who tuned in, and to me personally. You may have noticed, taking notes, and so I'm carrying away some excellent ideas that, with your permission, I'd like to share with others too. I mentioned an invitation to come back, and so if you are willing to, we would love to spend more time doing either in our Women Leaders program or another forum like this. We'd love to have you back. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mel. And again, thank you for the invitation. It has been a privilege for me just to talk to you and to share my thoughts. And like you said, I hope, and it's really encouraging to hear that I've made a difference, again, no matter how small. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. All right. And to those of you who've tuned in to us, thank you very much for joining in, and join us next time for our premier women's series. Okay. Thank you and good night.